when you have an incident when you're flying, especially if you're flying at full speed, because that's when things become accentuated and more aggressive and more violent. Also, with big collapses, the way a glider recovers is completely dependent upon, well, the type of glider you're flying, the size, the angle, the angle of the collapse, how deep it comes. You know, a very shallow angled collapse. Piece of paper. A very shallow angled collapse is, that's our wing here. A very shallow angle collapse is like this. They're just the leading edge breaks, but not really the trailing edge. A high angle collapse is more like that. So the collapse angle and the size is really important. That determines how the glider is going to behave. But for me, what's even more important is the air that the glider is then trying to recover in. If your glider is trying to recover in nice, smooth, clean lifting air, the glider can just, big collapse, not a huge amount of turn, and it reinflates and flies away, boom, on this heading. And you think, oh, my glider's dead safe. But that's just simply the air. You can have exactly the same collapse, and if the air that the glider is then trying to recover in is also in a turbulated flow, it's going to, boom, shoot a lot harder. Okay, so the type of air that the glider's recovering is fundamental to the behaviour of the wing once it has collapsed. So in those incidences, the most important part of that whole incident is your initial input, the very first thing that you do. Now, unfortunately, there's no one input that works for every single incident. Every type of collapse you have in real life is completely unique. It's unique to you, to your wing loading, to the air that the glider is trying to recover in, and unique to your initial input. When we're taught to fly, and when we're doing SIV course, I mean, I teach SIV, and when I'm teaching people to make SIV course, and we teach ourselves to do induced frontal collapses, where we deflate the whole glider, any SIV instructor will tell you, hands up, do nothing. Hands up, do nothing is the perfect recovery for a induced frontal in smooth, calm air. Because we all should know that if we start putting big, deep brake inputs, we risk coming into parachutal stalls and taking a really simple incident and turning it into something a little bit more serious. When you're out here and you're up any creeks up here, or you're in the big mountains, King Mountain, and you're in big air, strong air, and you take a frontal, the last thing you should do is go hands up. As soon as the glider deflates, the most important part of a big frontal is your first initial input. And I suggest to you that when you do feel the air go and, the wing goes, it's a big input. Okay? You bang your brakes hard to open the nose. Because if you don't, the tendency of a glider is to collapse from the centre and the tips can come forwards, very simply. And the higher up that performance range you go, up into the modern END type wings, the more likely that's going to be. Okay, because we've got plastics now, we're getting a big area of drag. So instead of the gliders kind of rolling into a collapse, what they tend to do is flick downwards, create a huge wall of drag, and boom, the centre comes in. Tips obviously have less drag, and they will naturally come forwards. Okay, so what we have to do with the whole point of our initial input is to reduce the size of the collapse. So rather than 100% of the chord deflating, we can nip it in the bud at 50% of the chord and get that centre opening and stop the tips coming forwards. So yeah, so everything in big frontals is to keep the tips apart, okay? And that requires a big brake input initially, the first thing that you do. And that generally will nip anything in the bud. It will stop it developing into something worse. Worst case scenario, when you've made that big input, is, I'm in parachutal stall. But if you've been trained, if you've been practiced, parachutal stall is really easy to recover from. Once you've got the tips apart and you've got the span of your wing above your head, put your hands up and the glider will fly.
And it cannot push the speed bar.
If you've got your gliders in correct trim though,
it will fly by itself.
It will fly within 3 seconds of yourself, of putting your hands up.
And what I find out about the initial input is just as quick as you can, just really touch the brakes and don't do this, like stay with the hands. No, it's better just bury it, just get into the farthest position you get and get them into a normal flying, like really good, and then just see what's going on. Alright, it's already maybe clean up, maybe not, but you get that first initial pump because something is trying to hit you at front and you hit it in the same amount of energy on the behind, and that behind basically helps to open it hugely. So just pump it and get it out.
Sometimes it may require 2 pumps as well.
Yeah.
We've, in testing with the Enzos and the R11s and the like, full speed frontals, the glider was banging in hard, just going into a small bundle, and you bang the brakes and nothing happens. You bang the brakes again, nothing happens. You bang it again hard and boom, it opens. There was a couple of instances with very good pilots last year where they took a frontal, and I'm talking about people like Alex Hoffer, you know, when they crashed, they took a frontal, a little bit of brake and then hands up with the glider bundled. And if you go hands up, if you go passive in those situations, nothing's going to happen. You have to bang the brakes, okay? This is more specific information for the higher performance wings, the Ice Peak 6s and the Enzos and the like, but it can happen on any glider. So initial input is really, really important on big frontals.